So, this is my review of the Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief musical. With I first off want to start off by saying that it was amazing. It was everything I wanted. If you're a PJO fan like I am, it's worth seeing. If you get the opportunity to see it, I highly recommend it. It was okay. So, I rank books as far, this is just speaking accuracy to the source content, because I think if you're ranking like how good is it, it's a totally different scale, but this is accuracy purely to the source material. I rank book to movie adaptations. Obviously this is a musical, not a movie, but I think it can go on the same scale. So I rank it Percy Jackson movie, the bottom of the bottom, to Fault in Our Stars is the top of the top, because I think if you remember seeing it, it was a basically perfect rendition of the movie. Like, perfect to perfection, everything you wanted it to be. So I rank it Percy Jackson the movie, Fault in Our Stars. I would rank it above Love, Simon, but below If I Stay on that scale. So if you've seen those, you know where that is. So way closer to Fault in Our Stars, but yeah. And I've never seen something I love so much turn into something so wonderful and so accurate to its source material. Also, I'm a musical theater kid. I love musical theater. I think it's like the best thing ever. I love it. It's like my favorite thing to see. The only reason that I wish it had been turned into a movie versus a musical, because there is a little part of me that wishes obviously it was a movie, but a good movie versus a musical is two reasons. A, if it had been turned into the movie, it could have been, I think it would be Harry Potter level in popularity, the books would have been. I think they just took something away from the series because of that. And another reason I wish that it had been turned into a movie, not a book, not a musical, is because I think if it had been turned into a movie, I could have rewatched it again and again. And that's really all I wanted to do when I left, was watch it again, and I can't because it's a musical. I can listen to the soundtrack, and I highly recommend listening to the soundtrack. It didn't get enough press as it should have. So my recommendation to you is, if you can see it, see it. If you're like, oh, it's coming near me, I wasn't sure if it was going to be good or not, like I just didn't know what to think, see it. Watch it, see it, it's worth it, it's worth the money, it's so fantastic, you won't be disappointed. It made me feel 12 again, like I was 12 years old again, and I was reading the books for the first time. It was so accurate. Anything they changed, they did not change the integrity of. Like, there were things they changed, but it all kept the integrity of the book, because obviously it's first of all, it's a musical on stage, so they just didn't have the budget they would have if they had a movie. So an example of things they couldn't do special effect wise, because it was a musical, not a movie, which I understand, was Chiron. They couldn't make him a centaur. They didn't really have a big budget either, so they couldn't just like have someone hanging off at the back of his legs. So instead, they had him. He was in the wheelchair when he was Mr. Brunner, and he would stand up, and when he stood up to show that he was a centaur, he didn't have back legs. He just had to put a tail on his back, but he like pranced around the stage, which everyone got the point. Everyone knew what he was supposed to be, but it was also really funny, which works for PJO, because PJO is hilarious and makes me laugh, and I was laughing. I went with my cousin, and the two of us couldn't stop laughing anytime he was like prancing around stage. It was really funny. He did an excellent job with Chiron. He was like one of my favorite characters. He was one of my favorite characters in the book series too. So you knew it was going to be great from the first moment. The opening introduction was prologue slash the day they got expelled, and it covered him killing Mrs. Dodds. So it was just basically the first chapter of the book where he killed Mrs. Dodds, and it's like the look I didn't want to be a half-blood. He sang that, and it was wonderful. And from that, the moment that first number ended, I turned to my cousin, and we just both kind of looked at each other, and I'm like, this is amazing. And she's like, I'm really enjoying myself too. And it's like 7 minutes in, and we both were sold. We knew we were in for a treat the first moment that they sang it. And then just from there on, it just kept going getting better and better and better and better. His mom was there, and it was wonderful, and I got all those feels because I love Sally Jackson, and if you read the books, you love Sally Jackson, and she was just as wonderful, and Smelling Abe was there, and I hated him just as much as I read the books, but Sally was there, and I loved her just as much as I loved her when I read the books for the first time. She was so beautiful, and they had a number. They brought little things into, like, things that kind of were on, like, we would have been okay if they hadn't, like, they didn't bring blue food into the movie, and that was on my millions list of problems with the movie. That was, like, number 1,000,000. But they didn't have to bring blue food into the musical, and I would have still been happy with it. But they did, and it made it all the better. They went to their Montauk, their little beach trip, and she had blue marshmallows, and he was like saying, "Oh, I'm not normal, you know, I'm different." And she's like, "Well, you know what else isn't normal? Blue food." And there was a whole song about how blue food isn't normal, and that's why she loved it so much, just like she loved Percy. Which I guess wasn't the original idea behind blue food in the books, but it also was, and it just warmed my heart that there was, like, they brought the blue food over, and she did what she did and was just like, "You're an amazing son, Percy, and I love you, and you're not normal, and you don't have to be normal for me to love you." And I cried. And then the Minotaur fight was also great. It was slightly different. It didn't happen in the same way it happened in the book, but it happened in the same sense, as in he was scared, he had no idea what was going on. He couldn't fight the monster. They were so close to him. There was a girl sitting behind me who goes, "That's not how it was in the book." Well, they didn't have special effects to do it in the book, so that's okay. It didn't need to be exactly the same, but they got the idea where he was really, really terrified, and he didn't know what to do, and he was lost and confused, and then they took his mother away, and then he's like, "Well, you took my mother, I'm gonna kill you." And so he then came and fought and killed him, which was it was beautiful. And then he goes to Camp Half-Blood, and he's knocked out, and he sees this beautiful girl as the most beautiful girl he ever seen, and I go, "It's her." And you see her come on stage, and it's Annabelle, obviously, and she goes, and he's just like looking at her and thinking, "Oh, she's so beautiful and so wonderful," and she goes, "You drool in your sleep." And I just was so happy they used that line. Their meet cute was the same, because it's so vital, and it just kept on going up from there. They had a beautiful capture the flag scene, which was wonderful. You know, she set him up. They had the scene, again, they changed something, so they combined the capture the flag scene with the toilet scene where she drenches Clarice, but it worked the way they combined it, and it was fun, and he drenched Clarice with the toilets, which was fun. They, like, hooked up toilet paper to these leaf blowers, and they just turned it on, and so she got, like, covered in toilet paper, but it was supposed to be water, which was really funny. I was laughing. But it was such an important scene in the book when he, like, takes control of his powers for the first time and, like, drenches her. And he did it in the movie, and it was fun, and I had a lot of fun, and I loved seeing her get demolished. And it was such a vital part of the movie, and it was fun. They also had Dionysus. He had a whole number about how he hates this job, and it was funny, and I laughed, and it was a great introduction to his character and to camp in general. And again, it just kept going up. They also had a campfire song where they, like, introduce, "Oh, we're gonna eat, like, this food," and they're like, they talked about how the gods didn't care much about their children, and that whole idea that was a theme throughout the book series, that gods didn't care much about their children. Luke was so well done as a character. He nailed his character. He was like, he seemed to be Percy's friend, he seemed to be Annabeth's friend, he seemed to be friends with everyone, but he also was like, you could tell he was resentful of his dad from day one, which was what it was like in the books. Then you found out who Percy's dad was, and they went on their quest. It was just, I don't want to give it away, and I don't want to talk about the whole thing because most people can't see it, but they went on their quest. They blew up the bus. There was a squirrel, like, you know how in the book they talked to a poodle? It was a squirrel instead, but it still brought the comedy of, Percy didn't want to talk to the squirrel. Talk to the squirrel, Percy. Go talk to the squirrel. And I laughed. That was another thing. I laughed the entire time. I mean, the same way I laughed the entire time in the books. The books are funny. They're so funny, and I just kept laughing the entire musical. I thought it was so funny. I couldn't stop laughing. They fought Medusa, and he sent Medusa's head up to Olympus like he did in the books, which I thought was great because I thought that was like a funny. It showed who he was and how he never really feared it was part of his character. He never really feared the gods in a way. They pissed him off. He told them, so he sent them the head, and that was great. Then there was a song called Drive, which basically took up the entire second half of the quest. Like, we got the whole entire fight with Medusa, but we didn't get any of the other fights in their entirety from Medusa on. And it's okay. They could only put so much in, but instead of just pretending like that was the only fight they got, they had a song called Drive, which highly recommend if you want to listen to one of the songs. It's very catchy. They mentioned all the monsters that they fought on the quest. Like, they went to the Golden Gateway Arch. They didn't stop there, but they're like, oh, the Golden Gateway Arch, look, it's the Chimera. And they mentioned the Lotus Hotel. They mentioned the damn snack bar from the Hoover Dam, which was funny. Like, I get it. It was from the third book, but it was fine. Like, details. They made a joke about it, and it was fun. And then also, fun thing they did at the Lotus Hotel, they didn't actually go into the Lotus Hotel. Again, they were just cramming all these into one song. So, they went to the Lotus Hotel, and, they were there, but they didn't go in because she's like, you can't go to the Lotus Hotel. This happens, I guess what Annabeth should have done in the book series was just like, if you go to the Lotus Hotel, you'll fall asleep for 100 years. It's like, I'm sure that's not relevant. And then they bring a girl out and they're like, what? How long have you been here? She's like, I got here last Tuesday. And then she said something. Me and my brother got here last Tuesday, May 1st, 1939. And I like, it took me a second, but you look at her, and she looked exactly how I always pictured Bianca looking, like Nico's sister looking. And I turned to my cousin, and we kind of just gave each other a look, and we're like, oh my god, it's supposed to be Bianca. Because her and her brother got there at around the same time Nico and Bianca got there in the book. So that was really fun. I thought that was a cool little Easter egg for the fans of the book series. I laughed. That made me smile a lot. And then they ran into Ares. They did not do the thing where they saved... Again, they cut things out. There wasn't the whole scene where they went to the Tunnel of Love for Ares, but they did have Ares and gave him a ride and then handed them the bag. So they planted the evidence. And then they went to Hades. The one thing that was a little different, they had a really fun song called DOA Records. And it was fun, and it was upbeat, and that was the introduction to the Underworld. And the Underworld was kind of like depressing in Percy Jackson. But it also encapsulated, I think, the fun nature of the book, which is, it's not supposed to be taken seriously. It was catchy. It was fine. It wasn't really a big deal. Oh, also, I forgot to mention, when they were on the bus, Annabeth was sleeping, and Percy and Talia, he saw a dream in Kronos and the Tartarus, and someone talking to him, and he couldn't see who it was. And Talia's name came up. And I'm like, oh, they're going to mention Talia. And they did. And Grover had a song, a beautiful song, where he explained Talia, which was wonderful because it's so important. And he explained Luke, Annabeth, and Talia and how I tried to get them there. It's so important to Luke's character, it's important to Annabeth's character, and it's important to his character what happened with Talia, and they told it in 2 minutes, and it was all I needed, and it encapsulated everything Talia was and everything that mission was to all of them. And I loved it, and I cried. That was one of the moments. I cried a lot. I wanted to cry the whole thing because I was so happy that I was seeing my favorite book series get turned into a wonderful musical, but that was one time that I actually teared up because I was really sad. It was like, Talia's fate was really sad. And then they got to the Underworld. The shoe sucked him to Tartarus, but he, of course, did not fall. Now, if you've read the Mark of Athena, you know that is... I'm not going to say, but we all know what happens in the Mark of Athena if you've read the Mark of Athena. So that was fun. I loved seeing that scene. I liked seeing it, and they looked down and they realized, and then there was the confrontation with Hades, and he had the chance to save his mom. He didn't have the pearls, but his dad in a dream earlier had given him a seashell, which he blew on and brought the three of them back, and he realized that his dad had loved him and cared about and had given him something and had wanted him to be okay. So he blew on the seashell and brought Annabeth and Grover and him back, and he left his mom behind. Oh, I forgot to mention he did visit the Oracle at the beginning of the book of the musical before he went on his quest, and they gave him the exact. It was almost word for word. They changed the first line slightly, but it was basically the same exact prophecy that he got in the book, which it had the last two lines. You shall be betrayed by a friend and you should fail to save what truly matters in the end. So they changed those lines. They had those lines, but they changed the first line. But it nailed it anyways. And he said, I failed to save his mom. And they got out and he realized that Ares had been, in fact, setting him up. And they had the fight scene where he beat Ares. And he had a whole song about how he was, like, proud to be Poseidon's son. And he beat Ares, and then he met his dad for the first time. And they had that scene where his dad was like, I'm sorry you were born, and it, like, hurts him. But he's like, no, you don't misunderstand. Like, you're going to have a hard life because you were born. But he didn't say it exactly in these words, but it's the same thing as, like, I'm watching. Like, I am watching you, though. Like, you are still my son. Make no mistake. You are my child, and I love you. Like, that, the way Poseidon always treated him, which was, I am still watching you, I still love you, you are my son. Never, ever forget that. So, and then they went back to Camp Half-Blood, and, oh, I forgot to say, she called him Seaweed Brain multiple times. Annabeth called him Seaweed Brain a couple times throughout it, which made me happy. Every single time she said it, I'm like, yes, it's like one of those little things, like, would it be okay if she hadn't called him Seaweed Brain? Of course. But did it make it better that she called him Seaweed Brain? Of course. I smiled every single time she called him Seaweed Brain. And they got back to Camp Half-Blood, and they returned, you know, the whole, like, everything was great, and it was the end of the summer, and he had a decision to make, and Luke betrayed him, just like he did in the books, and just like he did in the books, Annabeth was heartbroken. It happened a little differently where it happened in front of camp, so everyone knew, and he, again, knocked Percy out. Percy was knocked out, and he basically said, Annabeth, come with me, and she's like, no. And he left. And she's like, Seaweed Brain don't, like, she got, like, they change things. It's okay to change things as long as you keep the integrity. And so there was a little more drama where she gave him ambrosia, and he was, like, coughing, and she's like, Seaweed Brain, don't leave me. And he woke up, his eyes opened up, and he's like, wise girl. And I was like, oh my god. And then he decided he's not going to hide in camp, and he will be back, and there is a war coming, and he's going to fight. And that was that. And it was wonderful, and I gave it a standing ovation, and I highly recommend, again, if you get the opportunity to see it. And if you have seen it, I'm curious to see what you thought of it. Everyone who's seen it has all been really, really impressed with it.